In the cities of medieval Europe, great trade fairs emerged. These events were more than simple points of exchange for goods. They were meeting centers for merchants from different regions, who brought fabrics from the East, spices from the Mediterranean, and precious metals from Northern Europe. The Champagne fairs in France are a famous example, gathering traders from across Christendom. In these spaces, the need to record debts, payment promises, and contracts began to grow. After all, it was not always possible to carry large amounts of gold or silver from one city to another. Thus, the first rudimentary financial instruments appeared, such as bills of exchange and promissory notes, which allowed merchants to trade with greater security and convenience. Over time, some cities began to stand out as more stable financial centers. Bruges, Antwerp, and Amsterdam, for example, were not only places of commerce but also hubs where banks and exchange houses organized and guaranteed transactions. It was in this context that the concept of an exchange began to take shape, a space dedicated to bringing together buyers and sellers of securities, currencies, and goods. The term bourse originated in the city of Bruges, in Belgium, where the Van der Beurs family hosted merchant meetings in their residence during the 13th century. The family's coat of arms featured 3 leather purses, a symbol that eventually became associated with the trading space. From this informal practice, the idea of creating specific and permanent venues for financial trade gradually consolidated. Amsterdam became the beating heart of nascent capitalism. The founding of the Dutch East India Company marked a watershed moment. For the first time, a company issued shares to finance its activities, allowing ordinary citizens to invest in its expeditions. The Amsterdam Stock Exchange, created to trade these shares, is considered the world's first official stock exchange. The Dutch experience showed that trading stocks, bonds, and futures contracts could not only finance large ventures, but also create a dynamic market of opportunities. London quickly followed the example, with the emergence of the London Stock Exchange in the late 17th century, tied to the intense maritime trade of the British Empire. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the British colonies in North America were growing in importance. New York, in particular, emerged as a strategic commercial port. Initially, trade was simple, but as the city consolidated as an economic center, the need to organize financial negotiations increased, echoing the same movement seen centuries earlier in European cities. In 1792, a group of brokers gathered under a tree on Wall Street and signed the so-called Buttonwood Agreement, which established basic rules for the purchase and sale of shares. This agreement was the embryo of the New York Stock Exchange, NYSE, which over time would become the largest and most influential capital market on the planet. As in the medieval fairs, the logic was simple: bring buyers and sellers together in a common space, establish rules of trust, and create instruments to ensure transactions. But the scale had changed radically. What was once a practice limited to merchants and regional banks had transformed into a global financial system capable of funding empires, industrial revolutions, and later corporate giants. Today, Wall Street represents the pinnacle of this historical process that began in the fairs of the Middle Ages. What started with the exchange of fabrics, spices, and metals evolved into the trading of digital assets, complex derivatives, and billion-dollar companies. Understanding this trajectory shows that the stock exchange is not merely an abstract space of numbers and charts, but the result of centuries of evolution in commerce, trust, and humanity's pursuit of expanding economic frontiers.